Welcome to Digital Momentum. I'm Mike Ryan, Head of Retail Insights at Smarter E-commerce. This show offers conversational interviews with leaders in digital marketing, digital transformation, and e-commerce growth. Today, I'm joined by Larissa Walker. She has 15 years of experience in multi-channel marketing and has been instrumental in growing startups across a wide spectrum of industries. Larissa is now Commercial Optimization Program Leader at RS Components. RS is a trading brand of Electro Components plc, a global omni-channel provider of industrial and electronic product and service solutions, listed on the FTSE 250 with a market capitalization of £4.8 billion. I'm so pleased to have Larissa here with us. She has a truly fascinating background, which gives her a unique approach to marketing challenges, both in traditional and digital advertising. So, let's get into it. So, Larissa, thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time, and it's really cool to have you on the show with us. Let's get started. I'm wondering if you would give us a quick intro about yourself, maybe what skills and what themes are interesting to you.
So I call myself a full stack marketeer because I'm, as I'm told, quite a unique example that has both brand experience and offline channel experience and digital experience in a similar level of depth. Because I worked both in branding and I also worked in startups where I also had to do branding. So because of that, I'm also both hands-on and off. So I can be very close to implementation, but I can also be hands-off and manage teams that implement. And because of the amount of experience I have so far, I am, I suppose, quite also skilled now in leading teams and building teams, coaching teams, mentoring teams. And so I'm a 360 market leader. And I'm also a scientific marketeer, and I call myself scientific marketeer because my first education is science, natural science. I am a chemist specialized in biochemistry. So naturally in marketing, I'm also very driven by data and very analytical, and I'm also driven by experimentation. So that's why I call myself a scientific marketeer. And because of all this combined and because of my experience working in startups, I probably in generic terms, I'm a growth leader because I manage growth and I managed growth multiple times. I grew new digital products and I delivered growth in slightly bigger businesses as well, and as well as now. So yeah, I'm quite focused on growth. I'd say that's my key skill. And I suppose it also goes back to my personality type because I really like seeing results, and I really like to see growth curves, and that's what motivates and drives me.
So thanks for that really lovely introduction. And I think these terms like full stack marketer, scientific marketer, this sounds like a really valuable skill set and a really valuable profile that you have. And yeah, I admire this blend of traditional media experience and digital media experience, and on the creative side and on the optimization side, and in the intersection of those two things. That's really cool. You also kind of anticipated a question I had about I noticed this background that you have in chemistry. So could you tell me maybe what inspired you to study chemistry, and what got you into marketing, and maybe elaborate a bit more on that maybe how those scientific methods or that rigor or that mindset influence your work today?
I suppose it goes back to my background. I'm coming from a Russian family of engineers and physicists. So my family was quite mathematical and scientific. And my grandfather was a secret engineer working on the Soviet space program. So he is actually a rocket scientist, a rare breed. And it was quite inspirational, first of all, growing up in the family that is quite so scientific. And also And therefore I always thought that I'd eventually get a scientific degree, because I thought, first of all, it was fascinating, and there weren't any barriers to it in Soviet Union. If anything, it was encouraged, because I was still growing up in the Soviet Union. And one good thing about it, the scientific career, was there were very little barriers for it, but also it was one way of doing something creative and intellectual in the Soviet Union environment. So so I naturally wanted to go into scientific direction. But then I think when I was probably early teen years, I got really interested in chemistry, and probably driven by the fact that my parents were working with biochemists. They were collaborating with them scientifically, and they used to bring me some readings and talk about their work and articles, etc. So I got inspired, but I didn't get inspired by physics. I got inspired by chemistry. So Soviet Union collapsed meanwhile, but my desire to pursue science remained. But the only problem happened with that came with that is that science became very underfunded, and that was a barrier for me later on, for me staying in science. At school, I remember I loved solving organic chemistry equations in particular, and in general, at late school, I loved chemistry much more than I loved maths, and even more than I liked physics. Therefore, I entered Moscow State University after graduating, and I got a chemistry degree, and I did diploma work in biochemistry. And remarkably, my diploma was focused on lateral flow tests, the technology that is now being used a lot during COVID crisis. So from that perspective, I know what is happening at the moment in that respect, what these tests can and cannot do. So quite interesting for me to observe. I think the good thing about learning chemistry and biochemistry in the Soviet system also was that it makes you study in depth a lot of sciences. So we didn't just study chemical disciplines, we studied physics in depth, quantum mechanics in depth, maths in depth. So it was very, very difficult study. I remember it was extremely demanding. And but I think what it also helped me to develop, it helped me to develop this ability to learn new things, I suppose. And it also helped me to structure my mind in a very sort of analytical way, and defined my approach to business as well, going forward. The reason I left science was because it was early zeros. As I mentioned, science was underfunded, particularly biochemistry. And biochemistry, you have to have a lot of funding to do biochemistry. You can't do it on not modern equipment and with not having necessary reagents. So it was very clear to me that I couldn't do it in Russia. I went to the Netherlands for a bit for an internship in genetics, but I decided to not pursue scientific career there for multiple other reasons, because also I realized that biochemistry research cycle is extremely long. It could be decades before you see results. And I think it wasn't best fit to my personality. I'm quite driven by results, and I want to see them faster than in decades time. And I think that what drove me to end up in digital and in startups, because these are very fast growing businesses, fast growing products, and I can see results. But at the same time, it shaped my mind in a very analytical way. And I think I'm using science still in a way that I always run experiments. Wherever I work, be it startups, be it more corporate established environment, right? Like now, I'm always keen to run some tests and to learn from them. And if they don't work, it's fine. But if they work, it's brilliant, because then we can scale them and we can achieve great results on a bigger scale.
I mean, thanks for sharing that. That's a really inspiring and interesting backstory. And I think it's super valuable experiences, and maybe not the most common within digital marketing and within e-commerce. I mean, one thing you mentioned that you've got background at startups, and we'll look at that a bit. And you've mentioned a couple of times where you are now. So maybe we just talk about that company a bit. Could you say a word about your current employer, that's RS Components? Most people probably don't know about this company, even though it's quite large. Can you talk about who is RS Components? What are they up to?
So RS Components is a distributor of industrial and electronics products. So we supply engineers and factories with various parts, components, and equipment. And it's actually quite well known in industrial community.
Sure.
And around it. And I also met lots of people in my close circle, so people who work for startups and startup founders who know the business very well. It's a mature engineering business. It has grown out of London-based Radio Spares that was founded in 1937. And the thing that personally excited me when I was talking to a recruiter who approached me was when he said they sell robots. I said, robots, this is really exciting. And I think it explains, my background explains why I'm excited by robots, because I come from the family of engineers, rocket scientists, and scientists.
Yeah, definitely, and that totally fits in that way. And I don't mean to suggest that that RS Components is not well known, but not as well known as maybe some similar sized B2C companies.
Yeah, it's because it's B2B business, because we supply particular industries, so that's why it's known in particular industries to its customers.
Absolutely. So before we move on to get into the startup scene where you've worked in the past, I just want to follow up on one thing. After your chemistry degree, you then went on to be awarded an MBA at the London Business School, and you're still involved with the London Business School. Is that right? You're a mentor in residence. What does that work entail?
Yeah. So yes, I'm mentor in residence, entrepreneurship mentor in residence in London Business School. So, which means that I'm available for mentorship sessions. So students from LBS, any students, current students, can reach out to me and book a session on demand. For example, someone can reach out to me and say, can I have a mentorship session because I'm facing this and this issues with my startup, we're going through growth phase, and I need some mentorship on this and this. And yes, and we can have a mentorship session. So yes, sometimes after work or weekends, I mentor LBS students on how to grow their startup businesses.
That's really interesting, and I kind of imagine there's probably a mutual benefit there too, because these students benefit from your experience, and then and you must also hear about the most interesting new startups and get some exposure to interesting new challenges as well, and kind of like the freshest market conditions or wherever they are, whichever vertical they're in.
Yes, it is interesting in that respect, because they're all operating in different industries. They all face unique challenges to them, particularly. And I think you learn as much as you give in that respect, because you learn also about industries, you learn about different approaches, what worked, what didn't work, and some things I learn from them also enrich my experience. So I think, yes, I think it's definitely mutually beneficial, and I'm giving back to school and the school community, and in general to the startup world and the world of technology.
That's a really cool story and a cool opportunity. So let's get into that startup experience then. You held a couple of roles at the Just Eat group, which, if I'm not mistaken, that includes some companies like, for example, here in Austria and in Germany, there's Lieferando, and in the US, there's Grubhub, and this is really a massive undertaking at this point. So maybe you could talk about the work that you did with Just Eat Group. And another thing I would just mention, we had a crazy year, I think, for the takeaway service with 2020, and that stuff is baked into a lot of people's routines now. What was it like though a decade ago when you were working there?
It was a very different landscape, I'd say. First of all, the takeaway services, takeaway marketplaces landscape was different. There were no delivery only services like Deliveroo or Uber Eats, and Just Eat. There were a few marketplaces which were quite geographically segmented. So yes, as you mentioned, Lieferando, there was Delivery Hero in Germany, and there was Just Eat in the UK and a few other European and not only European markets later on. So yes, it was less competitive and not less competitive in a way, because the competition was mainly between on a geography level, really, rather than within the same geography. And there were fewer players. Yeah, and when there are fewer players, that makes you pay less for marketing channels, of course. So it's a completely different story in that respect as well. So I think that the greatness of Just Eat was that they had a couple of success factors, which was the concept that was really needed in the market by the customers. So it landed really well, but also great team that was able to execute it very fast and move very quickly and grow very quickly, because it's not enough to just have a great idea. You need to really be excellent in implementation. And I think Just Eat had this, I'd say, perfect skill set in its leadership team in terms of sales to restaurants and marketing to customers. And it was just a perfect combination, really. And the team was great, I think, and very professional. And I was doing a lot of things. I mean, I was heavily focused on marketing, because lots of even analytical and sort of internal consulting style of projects that I started with were very focused on optimizing our marketing mix, because we were still going through fundraising. We were just Series A business when I joined, and we went through B and C. In a couple of years, we expanded in 7 more markets. But it was very it was very fast learning curve. So we were rolling out best practices at the same time. We were entering new markets at the same time, rebranding at the same time, hiring people around the globe while maintaining great quality of our hires and the team, and also having a lot of fun on the way. We were definitely work hard, play hard company. So it was great. It was very fast paced. The work days sometimes were crazy in terms of hours, and sometimes I was flying around, and I was somewhere in India interviewing someone in Brazil to join the business. So it was from India. So it was very, very a lot of work to do, but it was also very exciting. And I think that's because there were 2 success factors, I'd say: team and the concept that was really flying.
Yeah, so it's that perfect fit at that moment. It sounds like you needed to act in a really kind of agile manner to just be learning and implementing in these
Yeah.
tight cycles. And that's something where it's not so different from the test-driven approach that you were discussing a bit earlier, that scientific approach.
Yeah, it's constantly learning something. And I think I remember I had this motto adjusted every week. What new that we learned about the business or our customers this week, from my experiments, from my analysis, etc. And I followed it a lot. And I actually still follow it. I keep asking myself this question everywhere: what new have we learned?
It's, I think, the most important question that we can ask.
Mm.
So the next couple challenges that you took on were at Blinkbox and RefMe. Am I saying that correctly, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So at Blinkbox, you were head of customer acquisition. At RefMe, you were VP marketing. And at both companies, you led digital turnarounds. So what did that mean, leading a digital turnaround at these companies? Can you help us understand what you achieved? Maybe what was your approach? What were your key principles?
Yes, it was basically it was multifunctional work with product and marketing, and with a very heavy focus on performance marketing to really optimize a customer journey, b optimize our marketing mix so it becomes very cost efficient as well. And I think in both businesses, and in general, my motto is always start with a thorough understanding of your customers. And then you will understand what marketing channels work and don't work. And then if you run these channels and you analyze them, you will also see what works and doesn't work within these channels. So when I came, of course, to both businesses, they already had channel mix established. So there were lots of digital channels running, and not only digital, and there was a lot of investment. going on into some channels. And what I did is I just started with a lot of data crunching, and then I coupled it with what we know about customers, what channels, from what we know about customers, from customer insights, what are the channels that are most relevant for them, where they can find us and where we can acquire them efficiently, and then how these channels should be structured and run. So within these channels, then I also started implementing best practices, and I looked at also scalability of them as well. And for example, when you look at some channels in general, at Trefme, we were targeting students heavily, and it looks logical to target students, for example, on campus, right, with some on-campus activities. But when you look at scalability of this and the cost efficiency of this, then you reconsider, even though it is relevant, but is it scalable? How much do you need to invest into that to make it scalable? How much can you optimize efficiency? So when you start asking yourself these questions, then you basically arrive potentially at a different channel mix, which is more scalable. And I think what we did at Drefme a lot is we focused on organic search, for example, and that wasn't very competitive, massively competitive. And we revamped our SEO approach completely in-house, not through agencies. And I think it was a great decision because we really achieved a lot there. And particularly, we were in not yet monetized customer environment, so we were not monetizing our customer base yet. So it was very important for us to bring costs down as much as possible to acquire our customers. And I think at Blinkbox as well, we had a digital channel mix, but the machine wasn't working perfectly. It was far from perfect. So I've looked at how PPC was structured, and I found some issues there. And I've looked at our programmatic, and I wasn't very happy with how transparent, or rather not transparent, it was. So I've basically revamped these channels quite substantially, and moved investment between different channels from one to another, that much more efficient, focused on organic again, did some work with product as well. So yes, so basically optimized in every touch point, but optimized with customer in mind, really knowing what will work intuitively or based on data, really.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting challenge too, because RefMe, we're talking about like software using academic citations, for example, and Blinkbox is in the video streaming space, and then yeah, of course, you were in the delivery marketplace before. So these are all different kinds of customers and different demographics, and I can imagine that's quite a challenge to to get up to speed on them. You just need as much data as you can get.
Yes, it's I think in general digital marketing skills and digital skills are quite transferable. And the challenge of a product like Blinkbox was it was very tech heavy, because we had a lot of apps. We had an app even for game consoles and TVs. And how do you measure all this? There wasn't tech stack available yet to measure everything. So we had to be very creative and come up with proxies to measuring these sort of channels. And so I think that was the complexity there. Whereas Trefme, it was quite straightforward because we had an app and we had web. Everything could be tagged and tracked, and it was much easier in that respect. But in terms of the products themselves, I think as a skilled digital marketer, you can work with any product following these simple principles, understanding the customers, how they consume, where do they find information about your product. So where logically you should always appear in order to acquire them. And then making sure that their journey is as seamless as possible. Again, by understanding how they choose, how they search, how they browse, how they eventually purchase the services. And I think this is the key for A, product, and then B, marketing, and C, product plus marketing in conjunction as well, because it should work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing those experiences. So you've overseen rebranches, product launches. You've mentioned product a lot so far already, and that includes a major product launch from scratch at Currency. So a bit of a different project where at RefMe and at Blinkbox you came into existing products, but maybe you could describe the project at Currency. What were the market conditions like at that time? Because this is a technology in the area of it's basically in the fintech category. It has to do with international money transfers and using money abroad. So what challenges did you face? How did you overcome those?
So yes, so Currency is a fintech. It was completely at early stage when I joined him, and it's also in somewhat competitive market, or what is perceived as very competitive market, because there are lots of fintechs in the UK originating from UK and targeting UK market as their key market. Currency was, however, slightly different. Not even slightly different, it was very different, but it was a challenge to explain why it was different.
Mm-hmm.
So Currency is a B2C debit card that basically the card for travelers when you go to holidays or when you travel for work, which is at the moment a bit problematic. But when people start traveling again, you can take Currency with you, and it cuts all the bank fees by connecting directly to your current bank account. So if you bank with any high street bank, you just take Currency as an extra card that is connected to your bank account, and you don't have to pay all the bank fees for every single foreign transaction. And plus, it saves on exchange rate as well. It's different concept, but there are sort of similar products. Therefore, it's not, or perceived similar products. Therefore, it's not necessarily easy product to explain.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we managed quite well, and I think what we did manage well is we went through all the right steps. We researched customers first in terms of just insights in their behavior around travel, paying for travel, paying during the travel, etc. But we also researched UX. Did a lot of UX research when we were building the website and optimizing it, optimizing the journey, and then we developed brand positioning, and we developed channel mix, and then we went ahead by testing these channels while building our waiting list. And for the launch, we already had people on the waiting list. We had publicity as well, and you can see a lot of publicity if you just type Currency. There is quite a lot, and so we already learned something by the launch. The only unfortunate thing with the launch date was that it happened just before the lockdown, a couple of months before. So you can imagine launching travel debit card just before the whole world is going to close.
That is unfortunate indeed.
Yes. So the team is now also offering B2B cards as well, B2B products, and they're doing well. So I'm quite happy for them. And I hope when travel returns soon, they will have more customers for B2C products as well, because it is a great product. And I suppose also another key thing is we found a particular target audience, and we found actually quite a big gap on the market, but just doing very simple customer research.
Yeah.
And that's where we positioned it as well. So I think in that respect, it was also great because we weren't just targeting every single person in the UK. We knew exactly who we're targeting, what sort of needs we're targeting, and that explained the success of our launch as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have the feeling that they'll have a bright future, because I don't think that anything fundamentally changed about the situation or the demand. I think everything just a little paused right now. So yeah, and that's, by the way, if you want to Google that, it's Currency it's spelled not like the word usually, but with SEA at the end, like the ocean currency. My kind of perception about the fintech market and about launching a product in there like that is that you're typically, the kind of traditional or conventional financial market is rather slower moving, and that there's a lot of margins baked in a lot of different places, and that typically there's opportunities to kind of trim some of that margin and hand it back to the consumer as value. Is that kind of what a product like Currency is?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's delivering value to consumers really through a product that is underpinned by quite lean structure. So it can actually survive on this while doing that, because the big banks would need to charge this fees because of their infrastructure, because of the costs that they have, the cost base that we have, whereas something agile like a new fintech can easily cut these costs and remain quite lean and still function and grow well and continue delivering this value.
Then it becomes about that scale that you've mentioned in the past.
Yeah. And that becomes something about efficiency as well. So you need to, with this sort of product, you need to make sure that your marketing remains extremely efficient and is optimized and over-optimized and being continuously optimized, basically.
Yeah, well, I think it's such a cool experience. It reminds me of these things that you said at the start about being a full stack marketer and a scientific marketer, because I think both of those elements really come to play in an effective go-to-market or an effective product launch. You need to just be able to cover all those channels, and you need to also test and learn with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this brings me to a really interesting time in your career, and it's what you're doing now. You've been at that point a startup CMO and in senior marketing positions at a few startups, and then you moved to a well-established company like RS Components. You described them earlier as mature, having a history back to the 1930s. So this is so fascinating, moving from these young up-and-coming companies to RS Components. What attracted you to that challenge, and maybe what's been different and what's been the same?
Besides robots, which I've mentioned before.
You did mention robots.
Yeah, so robots I found quite exciting. I think what else attracted me, there was the emotional part of it, because there's always emotional part in being attracted to the business. And then I think the very rational side was that I read about them, that they had quite substantial digital turnaround, and I read about it. And so I knew they were investing in digital, and so I knew basics are all in place. And that means that, and it's normally the digital infrastructure, that takes a lot of time to build, really, and takes a lot of investment. So it made me think that the digital base is very modern. So I just need to make sure that this machine works to its best. And I have a lot of experience in optimizing digital machines in various sized businesses. And it was quite easy even to switch to optimizing channels for large business, even though it's different scale, it's different tools that you can use at this stage. But because I suppose I have so much digital experience already, it was quite easy to pick this up and understand and clearly see what has to be optimized further. And then I think what I really liked the leadership team that I spoke to. Very rational, very grounded, very skilled, professional. And I also knew I could learn from them. And it's important for me to know I can learn from people I work with. And it's a business, it's a bigger organization, global, with multiple markets. In terms of leadership, again, the difference is I was not working anymore with founders who, well, sometimes can have strong views and opinions because they are under a lot of pressure, and that's explainable and I'd say understandable. And they're often brilliant people, but sometimes with a bit unorthodox interpersonal skills. But at RS, I found people very measured and very reasonable and very data driven at the same time. So data driven, similarly to how startup teams are normally data driven, but also very rational. So there was less emotion to deal with, basically, which I really like. I really like this change, and I also found that the teams were eager to move fast. They were eager to find ways to move fast, to really spend time on finding ways to make it happen. And I think the speed I feel I'm moving at is similar to how I moved in startups, remarkably.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You might assume or have the perception that such a larger organization will tend to get bogged down, or perhaps have like more hierarchy in place. But if the team, I think, is motivated, if the culture is right, you can overcome those
Yeah.
things.
And I think it's exactly that. I think it's exactly the right culture. The startup culture can exist in larger businesses as well. And the startup culture is about finding shortcuts where possible and working together as a team to make things happen, to make sure that everything is implemented. And a good thing about larger business, of course, is that you have more resources at hand. You have all the technology you need, and you also have people who can help you in various teams. And whereas in a startup, you would always be one person sort of band as a marketeer, particularly in early stage, and it can be quite stressful at times also because you wouldn't simply have people or tools to do certain things or to move as fast as you want to move, and you would therefore try to do everything yourself, of course, and but there are limits to what you can do in 24 hours.
Hmm.
And but and it can also be quite an isolating, lonely experience when you don't have any other marketers you can talk to around you, and when founders don't have marketing background but you'd like to bounce some ideas or discuss something. So I think benefit of having just larger teams of people who you can talk to and having tools and resources in place are great.
Yeah, definitely. And so that was not only an interesting career switch from startups to this quite large organization, but it was also occurred at an interesting moment in time. You mentioned that currency, unfortunately, was launching right in time for the COVID crisis. But what was that like for you? Because there were two crises occurring. We're talking about COVID-19 and also the economic and trade implications, among other implications of Brexit. What was it like joining in the middle of all that?
I think personally, I didn't feel in much of impact of COVID and Brexit. I think the only odd thing is joining a company completely virtually, and I've never met my colleagues. I've been nearly a year in the business now, and I haven't met anyone face to face.
Wow.
So that's the only odd thing about it. But at the same time, I wouldn't say anything was affected, like even my well-being or my work, my project work in the business, because I think, first of all, I just set a rule that I just have calls with people. I don't discuss lengthy topics over emails because A, it's waste of everyone's time, and
Mm.
B, it's always better to talk because you also build relationships with people when you talk, and it's faster.
Mm.
You can discuss some of the related areas, you can uncover some related issues to what you're about to discuss. So I think it's very useful. So I suppose the way I approached it, I just said, okay, I'm just talking to people a lot because that's the way to do it in this virtual world. I also set the rule of having 30-minute calls. So even if I talk with people a lot, I'm just trying to keep time boundaries to that.
Yeah.
So that I don't, again, waste anyone's time and
Mm.
with long meetings. I think these two rules really worked for me. And in general, the culture of the business is great, and people are friendly and open and supportive at the beginning, and still are supportive in my work, but helped me to get my head around the business. And yeah, I think it worked. It's odd, but it worked. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I love this topic about time boxing as well. And just, I mean, I think a lot of people, a lot of companies have struggled with meeting culture in COVID, and their
Mhm.
calendars getting full of meetings. But there's a lot you can cover in 15 minutes or 30 minutes. You can cover an
Yeah.
awful lot. And I think just putting that time limit on alone is so valuable. There's a few questions I like to I've asked them of several guests so far. I try to have some uniformity there. And one of those questions, the first one is, how would you define growth? Like, what does good growth look like to you, and how do you identify unhealthy growth?
When I think about growth, the first things I think about is two parameters. I'd say it's growth of number of customers and revenue growth.
Mm.
And that's because I suppose I'm coming from very startup background here. So it's not necessarily always, in startups, it's not necessarily always profitable growth at the very beginning,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a top line growth. In terms of what I think is healthy and unhealthy growth, and again, speaking from my past experience, my more than 10 years in startups, I saw various types of growth. Unhealthy growth, I think, is a growth with at expense of the future value. And
Mm-hmm.
that means that let's grow by any means, acquire any customers, and hope that they will bring some revenue in the future. So I think this is just throwing something out there in universe and hoping that it will convert and it will bring something is not very thought through strategy. Though it works for some businesses, but I think it should be thought through better, and it can be. Then also, I think growth of unmonetized audiences with not very good idea of how you're going to monetize the audiences in the future is also problematic, because if you know how you're going to monetize, again, you will focus on certain target audiences rather than acquiring everyone and anyone. And then I suppose non-scalable growth as well, if is not very healthy, because if you choose a mix of marketing channels that is not very scalable and is probably expensive as well, not super cost efficient. Well, even if it is cost efficient, but it's not scalable, then how are you going to scale this? So that's basically, so these are my few ideas about what I see as unhealthy
Mm.
growth. Therefore, healthy growth is opposite of that. It's an intelligent growth when you're acquiring customers that have a potential to become loyal or even become loyal right away, in parallel with also a smart retention strategy.
Mhm.
So you know how to acquire them, but you also know how to make them come back at the same time. And I think this growth is healthy because, and it's scalable as well. So it's having scalable channel mix
Mm.
to acquire and retain these customers.
Definitely. So, it kind of boils down to like really knowing and understanding your audience, so that you're not just acquiring customers, but yeah, that you can nail the monetization and the retention, because these things will sum up into the customer lifetime value.
Yes, exactly. I think that always is important to have in mind, because I think also in startup roles, what is often forgotten is that you will need to start making money from it at some point.
Yeah.
And the business model should lead to profitability eventually. And I think that should be in sight from the very beginning.
Mm. Yeah, and I think we don't only see it in the startup world as well, but sometimes I mean, it's sometimes a related phenomenon, but in a lot of these direct to consumer companies that are popping up, they're focused on really just kind of burning that rocket fuel at first,
Mm.
and yeah, but you got to be able to bring everyone back home.
Yeah, and then you can first grow acquiring
Mm.
any customers, really. You can do that, but you need to keep in mind that it comes with a lot of budget wastage as well.
Yeah.
And why would you do that if you could focus your budget straight away to the customers that you need?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, if you're in early days and you're trying to kind of carpet bomb a bit to test and the response and figure out who's your audience, that can make sense. But yeah,
Mm.
at some point you've got to work on making it economic. So another question I'd like to ask you is, what pillars form the basis of a sound digital strategy?
I think the key things for me always for digital strategy to have brilliant basics in place, and what I call brilliant basics are well researched customer, so you understand who customers are, what their needs are, what channel mix you can use to acquire them, and then decent digital experience. And I'm saying decent, nothing is perfect, but you need to have a website or MVP that has a minimum of what customer would need to actually navigate and then find the service or your product and purchase it. Then you need to have marketing technology in place, not necessarily the most expensive tools, but even just having Tag Manager and Google Analytics. And you'll be surprised, and I'm surprised often to learn that even these basics are sometimes not there very early stage, even though it's extremely easy to install them, for example. And then also the setup of channels themselves. So even if you do paid search, you can build it in a very granular way from very start. So you don't have to rebuild your structure account and lose budgets before you figure out how everything works. Because there are ways to build channels efficiently from the ground up when you're just starting, and then tailor them to audiences as well. And there's more and more of that appearing in various search algorithms, etc. And then, for example, in terms of programmatic, again, you need to have a transparent setup from the beginning, because it's very easy to have non-transparent setup in programmatic, and then you
For
have to
sure.
build a black box, and then you don't know how to optimize it and what it is doing, and you don't even see customer journey, you can't track it. So it's very easy, I think, to get into this trap. And then I think have decent targeting. Again, if you use things like Facebook ads, you can do a lot of targeting there. Again, you don't have to start with very, very broad brushes and spend a lot of budget on the customers that you don't necessarily, you can monetize and not your customers. So this is important. Another important part, of course, are people. I think building digital teams, great digital teams, it takes a lot of time and effort, and it needs to be a focus as well, because you need to have people who will manage this very well, who are experienced, proactive, ready to learn and experiment, and eager to move fast, and they want to see results fast as well. So I think it's extremely important.
Yeah, and definitely, and I love that idea of brilliant basics. I think that's so important to nail that, and to keep revisiting those topics as well. But I noticed, so those are some of your pillars for a digital strategy, and I was checking out some press releases from Ars Components and some sources, and I noticed that one of their strategic pillars is reinvestment to accelerate growth. Is there anything that you would elaborate on there?
It's yeah. I think here we're mainly talking about early investment in e-commerce, and Lindsay, our CEO, talks a lot about it. To the press, so it's very well publicized fact about us that we invested in e-commerce early, that we now generate more than half of orders from e-commerce investment. But in terms of reinvesting to accelerate growth, I think from what I'm experiencing, it comes back again to brilliant basics and to constant learning and continuous learning. What I'm doing here is similar to the startup approach. Basically, yes, you need to invest in e-commerce, you need to invest in digital channels, but in what exactly do you invest? You need to invest in the best practices, and you need to invest with the best efficiency, best possible efficiency. But to achieve that, you need to be constantly learning, constantly running experiments, learning from them, and then coming up with even more experiments, and again running them, learning from them, implementing. And that's the best way, I would say, to invest to accelerate growth, because this way you're investing in best practices,
Hmm.
and you make sure that you deliver with the best efficiency.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and particularly because that next investment, that reinvestment you make, there are these response curves in the profitability of each advertising channel, and you really need to be at that same kind of efficiency level or more on that reinvestment, which is no small challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need to be ahead of these curves, and you
Mhm.
also need to be ahead of any algorithmic changes. So you need to
Mhm.
work with all your partners to make sure you you know what's coming up. You test it early enough so you know how you're going to use it when it's live. And so that means testing alphas and betas as much as possible. So there's a lot about that, about constantly learning and learning early and learning ahead of everyone as well.
Mm-hmm. The next question, I mean, you've commented on this a bit before, so let me know if there's more you want to say here. I'm just wondering what workforce skills and cultural attributes you see that digital companies need to outpace the market. And you were mentioning a moment ago, like proactivity and the ability to learn quickly, the ability to move fast. Is there more that you want to add about cultural attributes?
I think also to stay optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
I think optimism is a very important thing in general in life and in business. And have an optimistic outlook. It helps with any setbacks as well. If you're testing things and they don't work and you have to close the projects because of that, you, with your optimistic mindset, you will know that you will find something else that will work. So you will not get demotivated necessarily. You will continue delivering results. So I think that is important. But also, I think what's important to mention is that it's certain personality type really that you need to look for. It's not only the technical skills that help build successful digital stories in companies, but it's also the personality types. And this is a personality type that is, as I mentioned, open-minded, able to move fast, agile, able to switch quickly from one project to another, and then intellectually curious and really hungry for results, I'd say. And a lot of these people work in startups, so I think startups quite good in building this sort of teams, because that's in a way a survival for a startup to have this sort of people in the team. And I think it's very important for large organization also to keep it in mind that that's the type of personalities that they need to bring in addition to the skill set, to the technical skill set.
Yeah, definitely. And I love curiosity. For me, curiosity is like it's a virtue, and I think it drives so many great things. I think it's the fuel behind being able to learn and adapt. It's the fuel behind passion. Oftentimes, I don't think that you can develop passion for something without that seed of curiosity. Yeah. So, and optimism. That's an awesome attribute as well.
Mm.
Not to be underestimated. Well, I've got one more question for you, which is what's next in digital marketing? Which trends are you watching? Can be opportunities or threats. Are there popular themes or strategies that you are interested in, or others that you feel are overhyped?
Yes, I think what I often hear is one overhyped strategy, which is called viral growth. Let's make this
Mm,
very cool YouTube video. It will spread virally and we will be growing with enormous speed. Or let's hire this one influencer and he'll give us endorsement and that's it. We don't have to do any marketing ever again. I think this is really overhyped, and I get questions from startups mainly about it. How do we build virality? Well, so you can't really just, sometimes it happens accidentally, like with
mm,
Facebook, because it was just the nature of the product and the need for it just coincidentally really merit at the right time. Whereas in most products, that's not the case. You actually, for a lot of so-called viral stories, how things spread virally, have a lot of budgets behind them and
yeah.
a lot of effort, and the whole agency is coming up with these concepts and
Mm,
a lot of content, a lot of test and learn and fail and learn again. So I think it's just this sort of magic of virality. It doesn't really exist. What I keep telling everyone,
mm,
it actually is a lot of raw behind that very often. And as was other trend that I'm following, I'd say, is AI, and it's AI in marketing tools and machine learning of algorithms. And what I can see is it's a very interesting trend to follow. But what I also keep in mind here is you need to be careful about using AI and machine learning, because you need to, is how do you know that that's good enough to make decisions without your intervention, human intervention completely? So that's the question I'm always asking myself when I find something about new AI or machine learning tool is, am I confident that I do not need to intervene with it at all?
Mm,
And often my answer is no, I'm not confident. I still need to analyze the output of this tool. I still need to potentially do some manual interventions based on what I see in the data.
mhm,
So it's great. It will be developing. It's super cool technology, rather tech approach, but it should be taken carefully with pinch of salt. And I think marketers shouldn't think that they can relax now because they have this great automation, which is doing everything on its own.
mm. Yeah, definitely. I think what's important to remember about AI is that this is not general intelligence that we're talking about. These are algorithms trained on extremely specific data sets, and
Mm,
they they don't have common sense. I think they can be extremely powerful, and they can be very effective in terms of the scale that they deliver, and they'll get there. I think they probably will get there someday. But I agree that right now observability as far as possible is important. Intervention, it's important to see what's going on and be able to, yeah, just be prepared. Like, there's studies about self-driving cars that indicate it brings forward more complacent behavior, and I don't
mm.
think you can let yourself get complacent in a business context.
No, absolutely cannot. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's something to always keep in mind. Exactly. I think related to that are chatbots. I'm always fascinated to talk to chatbots
Mm,
when I see them. And each time I'm disappointed. And each time I end up saying, can I speak to a human, please? And they say, okay, thank you. Thanks. We are switching you to the customer support assistant now. And then they, oh, thanks God, chatbot is gone now. So it's the same. It's cool. It's great that this is developing, but it's not there yet in
yeah.
many ways.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, chatbots too. I think sometimes you're not even interacting with you're more interacting with just it's more like a automation workflow tool or something like that than a really a proper AI solution. It depends what's being deployed, but yeah, they can be a little awkward so far.
Yeah, and it's something. It's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be surprised about. That's a technology in development. It will develop, but yeah, something to keep in mind. And I think other things that fascinate me are personalization,
Mhm.
and but it needs also some development in terms of automation tech available to do this personalization on a larger scale, I think. So that's very interesting. And I think also because I'm very search heavy in my background, my digital background, I'm always following SEO trends and what
Mhm.
SEO updates Google is launching. And I really like that content marketing is becoming human, and Google is valuing more and more really human content, because I think the problem was that previously the Google was valuing just any keyword rich content, and that led to so much poor content circulating around the web that you couldn't find anything. And now I think this is becoming a thing of the past. Google updates the more real content, really interesting and human content, which you actually read, is becoming important. And the more this content is ranked, the more useful it is for the world, because the internet is becoming cleaner. Simply, it has better content.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's got to be an existential kind of point for Google too, like because they need to deliver a good customer experience. That's their they just need to drive that search volume so that they can drive their advertising volume and so on. So it's an important challenge, and I think that's something that that the marketers need to um, take into consideration is, don't write for the bots or anything like that. Don't just keyword stuff, all this stuff, but really that the good content should rise to the top, the kind of the real genuine content. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I think these are the main themes I'm following and I'm interested in. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing those. And I guess we're just about out of time here. So before I let you go, is there anything that you want to, promote, or any people you want to give a shout out, any companies, anything at all?
Yeah, I just want to again say that it's the world, I suppose, especially post-COVID, is becoming it's becoming very important to focus on people and the quality of the teams, and also the well-being of the people. So
Hmm.
I think startups or larger businesses alike, I think should really start paying attention to how people, to how their teams feel, and how they feel working remotely, for example. And they should be making sure that the culture is maintained somehow. And I know it's very challenging with only remote working, but now people will be coming back, and I think they will have some time in the office together. And I think it's very important to understand how this time back at the office will work for teams to interact and engage in the most productive way and the most helpful way to themselves as well. So they can actually deliver, but they also can just have some fun and feel better, and not feel isolated working somewhere in the remote location. So yeah, I suppose that's sort of one thing that I keep thinking about in terms of COVID and how it affected our work, because it is a big event, and it has a lasting impact and will have a lasting impact of how we work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the future is still in front of us. I hear the phrase post-COVID thrown around a bit too lightly these days, maybe.
Yeah,
Then I want to thank you again, Larissa, for joining us today. It was a really interesting conversation. Your career is just so impressive and so varied. And thanks for sharing that knowledge and that experience with us.
thank you. Happy to talk.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time for an interview with Patrick Gilbert, author of the book Join or Die: Digital Advertising in the Age of Automation. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider sharing it with coworkers, friends, or within your professional network. We really appreciate it. This podcast is produced by Smarter E-commerce. To learn more, visit smarter-ecommerce.com.